All right. Thank you, Cassie, for joining my podcast.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for having me.
Why don't you talk about yourself and what you do?
So my name is Cassie of Cassie Valente Photography, and I am a photographer based in San Francisco. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I grew up, where I went to school, and also where I started photographing weddings almost 10 years ago now. And I am primarily a wedding photographer. I think there's something immensely compelling, wonderful, vivid, just something really real about witnessing the start of a marriage. So thankfully, I truly love what I do. I photograph about 20 to 25 weddings a year all over the country, and I photograph on both digital and film formats. The idea of storytelling and creating simply for the love of creating is the reason why I do what I do.
I know we've met like last year when Ramit Sethi had his event in San Francisco, and we met because I was just doing video just for the hell of it, but you were officially doing his photos for the event, right?
Yeah, I was very lucky to have photographed his wedding a few years ago, and when he came back into San Francisco as part of his book tour, he reached out and asked if I could photograph the event, and I was there.
Yeah, just kind of a little bit of background. I remember Ramit talking about his wedding photographer and how she was very good with being able to do an Indian and American wedding, and the fact that you were very professional and sounded like you've been doing this for a long time, but professionally, like full time, how long have you been doing photography?
So I photographed my first wedding the summer after my freshman year in college, so a little over 9 years ago now. And yeah, it's been an incredible almost decade of doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
But I did do it on the side for the majority of the past decade. I only went full time with photography just in the last 3 years.
Okay, so within the past 10 years, you've probably learned a lot. You've grown. There's a lot of things that you've done that you probably messed up in and learned from it. And we'll definitely get to talk about like how your journey went and how you want to share it, because you are doing an online course, like a mentorship program, right?
Yeah, so my online mentorship is next month. It is March 27th.
Okay.
It is something I'm really excited about. As I'm preparing for this mentorship, I'm really reminded of what sort of skills I have learned in the past couple of years, what things are important to me, what I really want to share with my students. It's an online one-time workshop. We'll be meeting over a group video conference call where I'll really open up my business and share all the ins and outs of the logistics of what I do. And yeah, it's something I'm really looking forward to.
And this is for mainly people who are trying to do it full-time, or just wedding photography in general?
So it definitely doesn't have to be limited to people who are just doing photography full-time. It's open to anybody who wants to learn more about the wedding photography industry, the portrait photography industry in general. You can totally get tons of takeaways, whether you're doing it full-time or on the side as a hobby, or if you're just curious about learning more.
Okay. So could you talk about how you decided to do wedding photography? Because from what my experiences were, like wedding photography, wedding videography, there's a lot of work that goes into it. A lot of planning. The event is several hours, like it could be 8 hours or all day. And then releasing like the photos or the videos, like that takes work too, and coordinating with the client. Like, how did you get into wedding photography, and why did you decide to do that?
So at my core, the reason why I do what I do, everything goes back to the art of storytelling. That's something that I've always really loved. As a little girl growing up, I read voraciously. I was always in the library. I was always reading after dark. My parents would find me with a flashlight under my blankets reading. Nice. And that's something that's just always been a really important part of my life. So photography, especially portrait photography, to me has always been a way of expressing this desire to tell stories in a visual way. I also love writing. I'm a very text-driven and literal person. So yeah, photography was really just this wonderful way of blending all my loves of storytelling together. And I started in high school pursuing a lot of portrait photography, totally on the side as a fun thing. I would photograph my friends. And then slowly it became friends of friends. And then it was friends of acquaintances that I barely even knew.
Right.
So around that time, I did start charging. And it was a very scary thing, but it really helped grow my business. And freshman year college, I had a sorority sister ask me to photograph her wedding. That was the first one. And immediately, again, I was just so drawn to the world of weddings.
Right.
How many emotions are at play there, the community, the family connections that happen there. That was something it just appealed to me so strongly. It's been something that I've really loved to do and kind of the core focus of what I do ever since.
When you picked up your camera for wedding photography, like, did you just jump right in, or did you start with like being second shooter or anything like that? Because, doing it as a first shooter is kind of, in my opinion, would be kind of scary.
It was horrifying.
Yeah.
When she asked me to photograph her wedding, I remember telling her quite honestly, "Are you sure?" Yeah. I've never photographed a wedding before. I've never even attended a wedding as a guest.
There you go. Yeah, that would be terrifying.
She was very trusting. She said she just left, she completely trusted me. And I remember I charged her $400. I hired 2 assistants who had photographed weddings before at $100 each. So I made absolutely no money. I looked up every single article that would come up on Google on how to photograph a wedding. I think I had like 42 tabs open that day. And I just prepared as much as I could that way.
Do you remember the first experience really well?
I do.
And how did it go?
It was wonderful. I think everything really came together well on the wedding day. And a lot of that feeling of excitement and wonder that I had while photographing the wedding and being part of the whole day's experience still lives on in me even so many years later.
Yeah. I think that just jumping in is like a very scary thing, but sometimes we have to do that, right? Like you're not going to learn if you go super slow or not do anything at all. So during that time, did you make a lot of mistakes? Did you screw up in any way that was kind of unforgivable?
I would say that even at this point, but really I think for everybody, we are all constantly learning. Not a day goes by where I don't learn something new. And sometimes I joke about this with my friends. I say, oh my gosh, I wish I could stop learning.
Yeah.
But then I realized that's such a selfish thing. Like, we're so lucky to have this whole world of possibilities open to us and to be constant students. So yes, I think my story is really unique in that somebody trusted me right off the bat to photograph their wedding as a lead photographer without any prior experience. A lot of the times we do start off first assisting and then working as second or even third photographers. And I think that's a wonderful thing. You can learn so much assisting others. I still do it regularly.
Okay.
It's something I really enjoy. But along the way, yes, there were definitely a lot of hard lessons learned. Learning what it means to have backup gear, learning what it means to back up photos in multiple ways, both on-site and off-site. I think really any possible scenario you can imagine, I have had some kind of experience with it, and it's been all a part of growing.
Yeah. And you did it as a side, like you said. When did you decide to do it full time?
Yeah, so after college, so I went to Georgia Tech. I have a Bachelor of Science in Science, Technology, and Culture. So completely unrelated to photography.
Oh, yeah.
After I left school, I worked as a creative recruiter for about 3-4 years. So I was doing headhunting in the creative space. And I really loved what I did full time. And to be honest, I never thought about pursuing photography full time. I think as part of my upbringing with very traditional Chinese parents, I never thought about that as a possible route to take. It was only in the last couple of months before I left my job that I wasn't feeling entirely happy with my job anymore. And that's when I start to consider doing photography full time. Again, having been raised by 2 Chinese parents, I sat down and with the help of my partner, we came up with spreadsheets on whether or not I could feasibly live in the San Francisco Bay Area on just my photography income. And we looked at the numbers and we felt like it was something worth trying. And that's kind of how it started.
Are you the type that that's able to take a lot of risks?
Yes.
Okay. So even
Yes.
at a young age, you were kind of down to do that.
Yes, there are definitely, I think they call it risk adverse personalities, and I'm not one of them.
Uh-huh.
I do thrive best. I do my absolute best work when I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So the more a project scares me, the more I lean into it. And that goes for a lot of the weddings that I take on nowadays. I'm not saying scary as in like bridezillas or like terrible clients, but
Right.
if there is an element of like, can we do this? We have so much going on. The timeline is so tight. There's so many guests coming. There are a million things happening in the ceremony. Can we do this?
Mm-hmm.
I get a huge sense of excitement and fulfillment when I lean into it and say like, yes, let's work this out. Let's figure out how we can do this.
Right. Okay, that's great. Perfect segue to making it as like a full-time business means that, and we kind of talked about this right before we recorded, you do a lot of logistical work, a lot of admin work, trying to find clients and all of that. Like, how much did you realize that like you had to learn while making this a full-time job?
So much. So I definitely, and again, it's something I'm still learning every day, but the entire business of marketing myself, of strengthening my own voice and what it is that I offer that makes me unique to my competitors, all of that is a constant growing experience. So reaching out to my ideal clients, finding how they find me, figuring out those kind of routes and really strengthening my presence among those routes. That's something I'm constantly doing, working on my own content, how I'm sharing it, and also just working on my art, just like the technical side of things, how I can continue growing that. Those are really like what occupies most of my time versus actually being out in the field and photographing.
Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to learn myself because, again, as we mentioned, when I try to handle the podcast, it's like, okay, I want to record, I want to edit, but there's a lot of things behind the scenes, like trying to schedule time. Like you and I, we met a while back, but we didn't get to have this recording until many months later. So, there's so much work that goes into logistics, admin work, and trying to find clients, and it's a great way to kind of have a holistic view of what a business is like how to run it, and learning from other people, and even with the finance, I think the finance is kind of a big deal because especially with our with cameras and all the gear that we have to buy, like it really adds up, right? Like having to invest in good gear, trying to make sure that you have enough backup cameras or backup batteries and all of that. So when you were pursuing this full time, did you ever have any experience where like you kind of struggled with the financial side, or you had to really think about, okay, I need to save a lot on cooking, or I had to cook instead of like eat out all the time?
Yeah, I will say on the topic of money, I've been very fortunate not to have had a huge difference in my lifestyle as I moved from working full-time and having that kind of income to doing photography full-time.
Okay.
I would say the biggest lesson I learned in money is actually, I think this is a very important one, and it's one that I try and like share with a lot of new entrepreneurs. When I started tracking all my finances in photography and looking at all of the revenue I was bringing in versus all the expenses I was putting into my business, I remember feeling so discouraged when I would look at my actual net profit. And there are so many photographers out there who advertise their mentorships and their workshops with these like crazy attention grabbing headlines. Like, in my first year, I made over 6 figures of revenue. Right. And I think it's very important to remember the difference between revenue and your net profit.
True.
And then from there, again, I used to feel so discouraged looking at my net profit and thinking, oh my gosh, like I brought home so much less than I actually paid out into my business. Like my expenses are so much higher. I must be doing something wrong. I'm such a dummy. And I was so hard on myself, when in actuality, we have to remember that for most businesses, most small businesses, it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years for them to actually be profitable.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then from there, it's very normal for your net profit to only be anywhere from 30 to 50% of your revenue. And this is like a very generous range. So that is a very normal thing.
That's good to know.
Yes. I wish someone had told me that a lot earlier, but it's a good lesson to remember.
Yeah. And obviously, like at the beginning, you probably had to shell out more money than get money back, right? Like you had to invest in gear. You probably weren't charging as much.
Yes, I definitely, even now, every year I set aside an education budget for myself where I put aside $10,000 every year to dedicate solely to improving my art and my technique. I will say, again, on the topic of pricing, I have always been very careful about my pricing. I think I've realized that is something that's a little bit unique in my industry. So many of us are self-taught. We learn pricing just totally by intuition. We look at other people in the industry. We try and compare price sheets. We do a little bit of A/B testing on our own. But for me, pricing has always been something that I have not budged on. For me, I must charge enough to cover my means at the very least.
Right.
So from the beginning, I've been very careful with thinking about my expenses, what goes on at every shoot I accomplish, what my typical subscriptions and my equipment and my gear, my insurance and taxes look like. And that's something that heavily factors into my pricing. So even though, yes, my pricing has increased throughout the years, even from the beginning, I've always been careful to make sure it covered my means.
That's a lot to think about. Like all the things that you listed out is just like, that's not something I've thought about at all when it comes to my business or anything like that. And obviously you have to know your worth, right? Like you understand that your work is worth X amount and that's your bare minimum, right? Oh man, I can't imagine having to worry about like insurance, taxes and all that stuff. Like right now, this is just a hobby, and I barely do client work. And my full time is what's covering what my hobby is. So as of right now is kind of like I'm not really thinking about the business side of my video work. Yeah. So you talked about the education portion. What are you learning throughout, every year or anything like that? Is it more of the business side or photography or both?
Both for sure. So every month, actually, I attend a educational meetup in the Bay Area.
Okay.
It's actually, I owe so much of my business to them. It's a national organization called the Rising Tide Society. And they have regular meetups every month in every major city in the U.S. And those are called Tuesdays Together.
Okay.
So I make a big point of attending those meetings, both in San Francisco and in Oakland every month. Every month there's a different topic. Last month was money mindset. So we listened to speakers talk on taxes and licenses and saving for retirement as a self-employed entrepreneur.
Right.
So in all of those business ways, I'm always looking to grow and learn more. On the technique side, I'm always looking to improve my storytelling for my clients. How can I photograph in unique, I want to say crazier and crazier situations? How can I best equip myself to handle all that before the big day even comes?
Right.
So those are ways where I'm always looking to learn and improve my craft.
Yeah. And even though you're doing this for 10 years, you're still learning. There's always, like you said, there's always something to learn. And that's amazing. I love people who are keeping that mindset. It just keeps you humble, I think. And it allows you to be better than you were before. You're kind of not content with just what you know and what you can do. Is you're always trying to be better, be a better version of yourself and all of that. I definitely have been using YouTube to learn all my skills, and I haven't. That's more on the technical side, but I gotta check out those events. They're happening every month. Okay. All right. Let me know the next time you do it.
Yeah, we should go together.
That's cool. So running a business, did you ever think about okay, I want to move away from just working as a solo? Did you ever think about having other people join your team, or is it more of you like to be your own boss and you like to work for yourself only?
Yeah, so this is a question I ask myself pretty regularly as my business grows. understanding like that there is a limitation if I'm the only one working in and on my business. I once did a very fun creative activity, which I think, again, any creative entrepreneur could do, where I listed out all the tasks that I do on a weekly basis in my business.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I went back and starred the ones that only I could do.
I see.
And ultimately, of the 100 or something tasks that I had written out, the only ones that only required me to do were actually photographing the wedding.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's very important to remember that there is so much that we do and we say, oh, I have to be the one who does it, where we could technically outsource and maybe we would find more value in having that time freed up to dedicate to something else. So that's still something I'm experimenting with. In the past, I have outsourced things like copywriting or social media planning, my taxes, my accounting.
Right.
I do need to be honest and say this year I've taken all of that back under me because I thoroughly enjoy it and I really love doing it. But as my business grows, I'm still thinking of ways to most effectively use my time and how I could possibly bring in outside help. On the actual weddings and portrait sessions, I do typically work with a team. So I have contractors that help me on those day of events. But otherwise, day to day, it typically is just me.
How do you keep yourself motivated? Because you don't have a set schedule. You can technically do whatever you want whenever you want. How do you make sure that you're productive, at least for the day, for the week, to allow you to be prepared for what's next?
It's very difficult, especially this is totally an excuse, but my personality type is very impulsive. So I don't do well with things like time blocking or having a set schedule.
Right.
But the best way for me to stay focused is every year I write out 4 to 5 of my overarching goals. And these can be both business or personal. For example, for the past couple of years, one of my personal goals has been to see 2 new countries every year.
Oh.
A business goal that keeps repeating itself every year is to book 5 weddings through planner referrals.
Oh,
and
okay.
I have these goals written out on a poster. For me, it's actually a piece of cardboard. It's been cardboard for the last 5 years. I'm not sure why.
Nice.
But this poster sits on my desk with these 4 or 5 goals on it, and I look at it every single day. So when I sit down to do my work, when I feel like I've woken up to 25 new emails in my inbox and 106 Instagram messages, and I'm feeling crazy and my mind's just everywhere, what I do is I look at my poster and I think, okay, what can I do today to get me closer to accomplishing one or more of these goals? What is something I can do today to make a dent in this?
That's great. And do you have any task management applications that you use, like Trello or anything like that?
Yeah, so I use a couple of, there's so many programs I use regularly in my business. And again, this is kind of like the behind the scenes expenses that I don't think a lot of people realize goes into photography.
Mm-hmm.
So I use a CRM, like a customer relationship management software platform called Dubsado.
Okay.
And that handles a lot of my contracts and invoices and scheduling. I use other software programs to organize and keep track of all my files and folders. I even have mileage tracker apps on my phone to separate between my business mileage and my personal mileage. I look at QuickBooks at least once a week where I do all my accounting. So yeah, so many different things.
Yeah. So, I mean, the CRM, the QuickBooks and all these applications, they all, the cost all adds up. And like you said, I think people don't know what they can do to kind of relieve them from all the stress, but it does kind of cost a little bit to use those applications and to run your business pretty efficiently. So I think, it's great to see that you're willing to invest in these things to allow you to do things more efficiently. Cool. So I want to talk more about your online mentorship course because what I really enjoy is that people are willing to share their experiences, and which is why I do this podcast, share their journey and just be more vulnerable, talk about the nitty gritty stuff. So could you talk more about your mentorship in terms of what they can expect from the mentorship program, and who are the main audience for this mentorship program?
Yeah, so my upcoming online mentorship is exactly the mentorship that I wish had been around when I first got started. So the theme of my mentorship is honesty. I'll be opening up my books, my spreadsheets, really laying bare all parts of my business and how I do it. So showing people exactly how much money I make, what my expenses look like, what my bookings are like, how many inquiries I get every year, how many go all the way through to the end with the booking process, everything. So again, this will be an online video conference meeting. I'll be opening up all of these platforms for my attendees to see. There'll also be open question and answer. So if you're able to attend live, you can ask your questions live. You can get those answers right away. If you're not able to make the time slot that I have booked out, I'll still be sending out a recording of the entire presentation to all the attendees afterwards.
Cool. And did you ever do this like in person with any mentees or anything like that beforehand? Or were you, is this the first time you're actually showing your books to the public essentially?
Yes, I do regularly teach mentorships in person, as well as virtually if they're not located in the Bay Area. So I regularly offer one-on-one mentorships. I've done whole in-person group mentorships before. Some of those have even involved guided shoots where we've had professional models and styled scenes for people to practice the actual art of photographing. So yeah, I have been pretty open with all of those mentorships, but this is the first one that I've done that's an online group mentorship, which I think is pretty cost-friendly. Like I know the value my attendees will be getting is absolutely enormous. So this is kind of my way of opening it up to people who maybe aren't local or don't live nearby and want to pursue this kind of education.
Yeah, and with the number of experience years that you've had, like there's so much to learn, I think, from you, and I think opening up your books is actually a very valuable thing. In terms of the online mentorship, did you ever take anything like this before?
Yeah, so education has always been a big part of how I grow my own business. So when I first quit my job and started doing photography full-time, I really front-loaded that year with pursuing a lot of private mentorships. Some that stick out in my memory in particular. I attended classes with photographers like Tyler Rye and Donnie Zavala, Darcy Benincosa. I took a one-on-one film mentorship with a woman named Kate Anfinson, who really taught me so much in terms of film foundation. So I currently photograph on both digital and old school, like medium format analog film. Oh, wow. So that's something I really love to do. So yes, I owe a lot to the mentors I've had and how open and honest they were with me. So that's something that's always been really important in my business and the kind of community that I want to in turn foster and give back to.
Do you know a lot of other photographers, and do you guys hang out and, take gigs together a lot?
Yes. So community is a huge part of my business. I have a regular group of creative freelancers that I am connected with, and we actually meet once a month.
Oh, okay.
Where we set business goals and keep each other accountable on them. We have a funny name. Our group is called the Office of Accountability. We're about 15 to 20 members at this time, and it runs the full range from wedding photographers to people who aren't even in the wedding industry. So online visual designers, calligraphers, paper goods artists, florists, planners, illustrators, watercolors.
Yeah.
So it's been really wonderful. Again, like it's a constant kind of learning focused sort of community where we're very open and honest with each other, and that's, I think, the best way for us to all grow.
Yeah. And how do you guys keep each other accountable?
So we meet once a month in person, where we spend time sharing the progress from our last month and how our goals have gone. And then we go around in a circle and we share our new goals for the upcoming month that we hope to accomplish before the next meeting. In between meetings, we have a Slack channel where we post all our goals and discuss and communicate and ask questions and seek answers together with. We also do a lot in terms of like personal growth outside of our business.
Okay.
So, for example, one of the members of our group earlier this year voiced that she really wanted to be more active outdoors and make more of her morning time. So, as part of our Office of Accountability, we started a spin-off group called Hike Club.
Oh,
and
cool.
Now we go out hiking twice a week.
Yeah.
Once in the city and the second time in East Bay.
Cool.
And yeah, we do that with each other twice a week.
How important is it as a freelancer to get out of the office and go on a hike where, you're kind of outdoors, away from even your city sometimes, because you live in SF and work in SF, but you go to the East Bay. Like, how important is that to you?
I would say leaving your job to go hiking maybe isn't the most important thing in the world. But the idea of getting outside of your own head and your own opinions when it comes to your business and really seeing how other people work, seeking community, and just not being afraid to ask questions. Because again, when I first started, I think a lot of what kept me from growing and really improving as both an artist and a businesswoman was just being afraid to ask questions. I thought if I asked somebody, hey, is this the right way to email a client, or is this the tool you would use to photograph this kind of situation? I thought if I asked those questions, it would make me look so naive and so unexperienced.
Yeah.
When actually, like, not asking those questions was what was preventing me from growing.
Interesting. So kind of get rid of your ego and be able to ask questions when you really need to know, versus like trying to just figure out on your own and maybe make the mistakes where you could have easily figured it out by asking someone.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And do you bring your cameras to these hiking events?
I don't, but one of our members does. She's an excellent documentarian.
How often do you, when you like go out on social events, do you not bring your camera? Because like I have a problem where sometimes when I'm traveling or even just hanging out with friends, I'll bring my camera, and it's for me, it's like sometimes distracting. I'm either not hanging out with my friends and really talking to them, or I'm not taking any pictures and I'm just bringing my camera for no reason.
So I personally always have a camera on me, and that camera is my phone.
Okay, there you go.
I think there's a lot to be said with how incredible the technology on our phones is nowadays. That being said, I have plenty of friends that do bring their actual like professional cameras with them everywhere they go. I think it's totally up to you, like what works with your lifestyle and your workflow. For me, the kind of content I put out there, I love images that directly tie into the kind of work I want to be doing. Mm-hmm. That's why I share predominantly wedding work.
I see. On
my website, on my social media platforms. I'm not doing a ton of lifestyle work. If that ever became a larger part of my business, then perhaps I would be photographing more during these outings and whatnot. But my business, again, is mostly about my clients and the stories that I get to tell for them, and less about my own life, even though it does totally seep into all my work at some point. So yeah, that's why I choose to do kind of what I do.
To get a little bit of idea of wedding photography, like how much of time do you spend with the client before the actual event?
So on a whole, from the beginning to end, in terms of all of the logistics, the emails, the calls, the planning, I spend anywhere from 10 to 20 hours per client. Mm-hmm. That time isn't necessarily directly with my couple. So the majority of my weddings nowadays are booked through planners.
Okay.
And these are full service planners. So many of my couples find value in hiring a planning team, not only for, again, like the logistics and coordination of the day, but the design and the look and feel of the experience for their guests and their friends and family. Mm-hmm. So I'm working very closely with these planning teams on a lot of the behind the scenes details that my couple doesn't ever have to worry about.
Oh, interesting.
So there's a lot of that kind of back end planning that goes into the wedding. And then many of my couples also do opt to do an engagement session. So there's also time where we can photograph them on a day where the time is entirely our own. Mm-hmm. And that's always a really lovely experience too.
Do you work with clients only in the Bay Area, like say only San Francisco, or do you kind of go around the whole Bay or anywhere outside?
I actually travel all over the country for weddings.
Oh, okay. So that's where your goal to go to different countries Is that like to work in different countries?
So I'm very, so my international travel is mostly personal.
Okay.
There are a lot of, I wouldn't say restrictions. I would say you have to be very careful when it comes to doing professional work internationally. There's a lot of permitting and visa work that I think people don't often realize when they accept work abroad. And again, if you're really to serve your clients to their best interest, that's something that we need to be mindful and take care of, so that we're not stopped or turned around in airports before a big wedding.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do photograph all over the U.S. So I've had several big weddings all over the East Coast. I travel up and down the West Coast, all over California. This year, I'm really excited to I think my next big wedding is in Georgia. I have a multi-day Indian wedding there, which I think is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I have a fun wedding in Albuquerque, New Mexico during the Hot Air Balloon Festival.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so we're gonna go all over.
That's cool. And I think we talked about it. You do different weddings for different religions and different cultures. How was the experience for that? Because obviously there's a lot of different expectations of like how the event will run and stuff like that. Did you just learn on the go?
Yeah, so how I handle that goes back to just how I personally see the world and how I interact with people. I really truly love what I get to do, and my work runs the full range. I have elopements where only the couple is present, no guests.
Oh,
and then
wow.
I have these huge multi-day multicultural affairs with hundreds, if not thousands, of guests and family coming in from all overseas. And ultimately, this is a business of people. It's all about hearing their needs and delivering on that. So all of it is open communication, being very patient, understanding exactly what it is that a client needs and is looking for. I do personally, I think a part of me really loves big, crazy families, because I have a little bit of that in my own personal life.
Right.
So again, that part really excites me. I love going into events where I know like I have 40-something requested family group photos, and we've got all these extended family members we need to take care of, and that's something that I just really love to deliver on.
Yeah, I'm surprised because like those are obviously hectic, right? Like trying to round up everybody and all of that. And I feel like, because I've been to a few weddings where there's just so many people, 500, 600 people, and even as a guest, I'm overwhelmed. So I can't imagine as the photographer, like trying to coordinate everything, trying to get the pictures and all of that. It must be hectic, but you seem to get some joy out of it.
Yeah, I really thrive off of finding order in the chaos. And again, there's so many tips and tricks that we employ to make the actual day of process go as smoothly as possible. So I can just share a few here. For example, with family photos, almost always we have the whole shot list planned out with all the requested configurations way ahead of time.
Right. Oh, okay.
If there are particular family dynamics I need to be aware of, any sort of tough relationships, that's something we discuss beforehand. We list out all of the family members in every grouping by first name. Oftentimes I'll even arrange them in order from left to right, so on the day of it's a very easy placement. I know exactly who needs to stand next to who. We'll have a family member or a really kind of in tune with it guest be the one in charge of calling out all the names. So there's so many ways that we can kind of plan ahead of time to make this go as smoothly as possible. It's like I think it's a pretty rare thing in my industry, but I think photographing the family photos is one of my favorite parts of the wedding day.
Interesting. That's I respect you for being able to jump into that and just like try to create order out of the chaos. That's really cool. Cool. So I think this is a perfect time to get into Instagram questions. So these are questions that my followers have asked that they want to know from you. So the first one is from KDC Creations. She's a photographer as well. What was the most challenging thing that you had to overcome being a wedding photographer?
That's okay. So the most challenging thing I've had to overcome with being a wedding photographer. I think this is a little personal to me. So
Okay.
I have a hard time tying my own self-worth to the amount of money I make.
Oh.
And that's something that has really come up a lot for me often, more frequently in this third year of doing business and in my first and second. And I think it's because my first year I made X amount of money. My second year I made more money. And naturally I just assumed my third year I'm going to just be growing exponentially at the same rate. And that's not true. Again, I'm one person.
Right.
There is kind of a limitation at some point to how much I can make unless I charge more or reduce expenses or really think outside the box.
Right.
So learning to kind of temper these expectations and untie my self-worth from money is actually the hardest lesson that I've learned and I'm still attempting to learn. So things like understanding, why do I feel this need to constantly make more money? Do I actually need this money for anything? No. Like my happy life doesn't mean making $5.7 million a year.
Right.
You know, like trying to define what it is that I actually need for my business. A good friend of mine really honed it in. And when she told me that she does what she does for the art of creation, not for the actual business of it. And that was kind of like an aha moment for me. Just remembering again, like why I do this, the storytelling, the connection with my clients, the just emotional quality of it all. That's kind of my why. And it's not about making money, even though money is very important to grow your business and help you be the best that you can be. But that is definitely the hardest lesson I'm still working on learning.
That's great because people always think that like, oh, to be happy, like you need to make, 5-6 figures like with the work that you're doing, and sometimes you forget like your enjoyment of the actual craft or what you're doing, because if you enjoy photography but then you're starting to worry more about the money, you're not really going to focus on that anymore. And it's really great that like you're remembering that, to be able to just make a living off of it and just being happy with the work that you're doing. I think it's a good balance, right? You need to have that balance of like being able to live off of it but still enjoy what you're doing. So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I want to I'll put it this other way too, because our industry can be very competitive. A very common thread that I see in Facebook groups for wedding photography online, people love to post how many weddings you have booked for this year.
Oh.
And people all around the country will answer, well, I have 45 weddings. I have 2. I have 75. I have 8. And it becomes this crazy comparison game where you can only see 1% of someone's story and immediately you just feel bad.
Interesting.
Because you don't know what these people are charging, what their average price point is. What if somebody says they photograph 50 weddings a year for free?
Right.
Or if somebody photographs 2 weddings a year at $100,000 each.
Yeah.
I think as an industry, we must think smarter. We must think about how we can actually grow and if asking these questions really helps or hinders us.
That's true.
That's the kind of like money tie association that I'm working on, trying to get away from.
Yeah, there's so many variables into like that question. Like you can't answer it just like, oh, I have 52 weddings or whatever. Because yeah, like you said, with money, like if you're happy with that many weddings, or you're happy with like just 2 gigs, right? Like there's so much more to the story, and you can't just answer it with just like how many gigs you have. So
yes,
yeah, that's very interesting. I like that. Cool. The second question is from J Bay. How would you describe your style of photography?
My style of photography is very romantic. I'm a huge romantic at heart. It's the kind of storytelling that I'm most drawn to. My work is also very artful. It's very intentional. There's always thought behind what I do. I'm very into looking at details, the shape of framing, the composition, exactly what their hands are doing. Hands are a big part of storytelling for me. It's one of my favorite features of kind of like the human body. And then third, my work is very honest. I really want to tell a story that's unique to my couple, not just repeat a cookie cutter pose or a template and like kind of mash it on my couples one after the other.
Right.
Instead, I really want to know them and how they interact with each other and what is really unique and special about their story, and have that come out in their photographs.
I like that you focus on the client and like what you can do with them outside of like the cookie cutter structure of like a pose and like, you know, location and all of that. That really shows that you're really focusing on the client and you're putting a lot of effort into creating good work and things that really work with them. So cool. The last question is from Karina Graham. What is your go-to gear of choice?
Yeah, so I photograph most my weddings and portrait sessions with a Contax 645. So that is a medium format film camera made in the 90s. My biggest tool of choice with that is Fuji 400H 120 millimeter film. And then my default film lab is Photovision Prints. They're based in Salem, Oregon. They process almost all of my film work.
Oh, cool.
On digital, I do photograph with 2 Sony A7 IIIs. I have to like think about that. That's relatively new as of June of last year. I used to photograph exclusively on digital with 2 Canon 5D Mark IIIs. And then I mostly use prime lenses. My lights are mostly Godox these days. Yeah.
That's going to make a lot of Sony people happy, seeing you switch from Canon to Sony.
Yep. And then everything is done on a 2012 MacBook Pro.
2012?
2012.
Wow.
It's still alive and kicking and working okay.
Okay, wow. It can handle like the stress of the application, the Adobe applications?
For now, yeah. It started to actually struggle a little bit after Adobe updated everything for 2020. So we're thinking about replacing soon, but it's done great, knock on wood.
Yeah, actually, kind of like a side note, I just got my laptop order. It's ready for pickup today, so I'm super excited to check it out, to try it out, and like using Premiere Pro and Media Encoder to like export my videos. Like it's super slow on this laptop.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited for a more powerful laptop.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I do want to preface and say, while my laptop is extremely old, it is backed up almost every single day onto a external hard drive. So if it were to crash today, tomorrow, it's no big deal.
Smart.
It's all good.
There you go. Cool. So what's next for you besides the mentorship? If you want to say when the date is again, and what else is next for you?
Yeah, my online mentorship is March 27th. If anyone's interested in seeing more details about it, you can read about it on my website under the mentorship tab. I have a really exciting personal shoot in the works. That's kind of another way how I keep myself feeling creative and alive, is pursuing a lot of personal work where the only client is me.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So I've got that coming up in March. I'm renting out this really cool space in Oakland to do it, and teaming up with a bunch of other really awesome, talented vendors in the Bay Area. And after that, I'm traveling over to the East Coast for a couple of weddings this year as both a photographer and a guest. So I'm really excited about that. And I really hope to visit Hawaii for the first time this year.
Oh man, Hawaii is amazing. Do you know what month you're trying to go?
I don't have anything booked yet, but I'm putting that intention out there.
Okay.
So that we all know, and then I stay accountable for that.
Accountable. Late August, early September is not bad. It's not too hot, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Cool. And so if people want to follow you on social media, check out your website, where should they go?
So they can find my work at www.cassievalente.com. That's Valente, V as in Victor, ALENTE. And then my Instagram handle is Cassie Valente Photo.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming, Cassie. I'm really happy that we got to do this.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's been great.
Yeah, cool.